What's up, everybody? This is Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown, and I don't know if I've ever done a video like this, but every once in a while I do a video, and the feedback that I get in the comments section is overwhelmingly negative. So there have been a few videos where that has happened, and largely I just tend to ignore that because sometimes maybe it's the way that I title the video, or maybe it's the way that the YouTube algorithm promotes it to people who just would naturally disagree with the content. For whatever reason, sometimes there's a lot of negative comments about the content that I've produced in the video. Well, today's different because I'm not ignoring it. A lot of the comments, number one, are kind of ridiculous when you put a little bit of thought into them. But they are, but just there's a common theme going through some of the comments, and not from most of you who have been around the channel for a long time, because you have heard more of a complete picture around my thoughts on some of these issues, but they are deserving of a response. And so I did go through, if you left a comment, I did go through and respond to almost all the comments so far. And so, but I did think that it was important to make a video about it where I address all of the concerns, all the questions, all of the critiques kind of publicly, because I know that if there was something that caused you to want to write one of these critiques, you probably thought of some of the other ones as well, and you might not have seen some of the other people's comments or seen my response. And so before we start, if you haven't already watched my last video on taxation is theft and stopping paying taxes through legal means, before we dive in, go back and watch that video. It was my very last video that I made before this, and then jump in here. We're going to go through line by line and kind of provide an answer and response to all of the questions or critiques. Ready? Let's dive in. Okay, so this first one is, I don't know why, but this is kind of a common thought that people think that the new taxes, the new Trump taxes got rid of the interest deduction on homes, on mortgages. It's not true. They did lower the amount if you want to qualify for getting an interest, getting a deduction on your taxes for the interest that you pay on your mortgage. They lowered the amount that cutoff is at. So if your mortgage is more than, depending on your tax filing status, if your mortgage is more than $500,000, you don't qualify anymore. But most of the time, the people who are upset about taxes would want something like that to happen. That's more of a kind of a change that would normally come from the left, right? Making it more taxes for the rich. So they lowered that. They didn't raise it. And then the second reason, I think this is probably where people are coming from here, is that the standard deduction was raised, and that just means that without having to itemize, the standard deduction that everybody gets was raised. And so for most people, the way that worked out was that now you're saving more as an individual or as a household by taking just the standard deduction instead of itemizing everything together along with your mortgage interest. And so, no, they didn't get rid of the mortgage interest deduction. It's just that most people don't need it anymore because they're saving more money with just the standard deduction. All right, this one says that corporations have their own constitution. They're treated differently when it comes to paying their taxes. Well, they don't have their own constitution, but they are treated differently when paying their taxes. That was part of, that was a major point of my video. And nobody is stopping you from starting your own corporation. That's the point. It's that all of the rules are available to everybody. If you want to take advantage of any of the rules or any of the deductions or any of the credits, they're available to you. You just have to learn what you have to do to be able to qualify for them and then take advantage of them. Yes, that was a huge part of my video. Employees, by and large, pay the most in taxes. That activity, being an employee, is disincentivized by our government. Other things like providing jobs and providing housing and investing in growth and development, those things are incentivized. So nobody's stopping you from doing those things. If you want that tax treatment, go do those things that get that tax treatment. And that last line, the tax system stinks. Sure, 100%. I'm not saying that the tax system is perfect or that it's good or that it's effective. I'm just saying that, number one, Taxes are the rules of the game of money. And if you want to win a game, the first thing you have to do is understand what the rules of the game are. And if the tax system is ineffective, the best thing you can do to help out our country is to not give your money to that system and deploy it effectively yourself. Direct your dollars in a more effective way yourself. And the only way that you can do that is to follow the rules of the tax system. Don't pay anything in taxes through the actual legal system, and then do what you feel is best with your money. And so stop complaining about there being a fence and just go get on the other side of the fence. Now this comment says, can't it be argued though that charities can't budget national issues since they don't guarantee that they'll take in enough each year? Well, the federal government doesn't take in as much money as they need each year. That's where deficits come from, number one. And number two, this video was not about solving systemic issues. This is about your tax dollars, and the most effective and moral thing you can do with the money that you've earned with your hard work. Now, if you send off all of your money to the government, they're going to take a massive cut. They're going to line their pockets, and a small percentage of the money you send to them will go to the areas that you believe are effective or moral or good. And so he says, if I believe all children have a fundamental right not to starve to death, I don't see how I can leave that in the hands of charitable donations. Well, number one, that's not happening in America. And number two, charities are far more effective at providing directed assistance to people in need than governments are. And it's because it's a bottom-up structure. It's decentralized. There are tons of charities and nonprofits and organizations that are tiny, local, they're city-based, and they survive just on donations, and they provide a lot more directed assistance that actually helps people, rather than some corrupt system that actually ends up hurting people, like food stamps, for instance. And finally, this video was about the federal income tax only. This wasn't about other taxes that the federal government actually does have the power to levy, and it also wasn't about state taxes or city taxes. It would be a far more effective system if the, like in some of the Scandinavian countries, I think in Switzerland, all of the way that the money is spent is decided at the local level. So it's just not a system that works when you have a top-down control where all the decisions are made at the top, especially for a system as large as the United States. So, scale changes things, scale breaks things. And so if you believe in these things and you like the fact that there's a system, kind of like a control system where everybody puts in and it's not reliant on individual choices, that's far more efficiently taken care of and done through things like city governments and state governments, because they can make decisions and direct capital allocation in a far more effective and efficient way than something like a federal government can, simply because they're closer to the streets. There's a much smaller distance between the needs and the decision makers. And there's skin in the game too. You have a lot more control as an individual on how you vote for things to take place. All right, and this comment said, the vast majority of your videos are great, extremely useful. In this one, you seem to reject the concept of a common good. I'll stop right there and then keep going. No, I absolutely do not. I 100% believe in the common good. I just think the federal government is probably the least effective and least efficient avenue to go about achieving any sort of a common good. Included in the Constitution with the words promote the general welfare. That one phrase accounts for probably 90 or 95% of every dollar that the federal government spends. And that was 2 words in the entire Constitution. So it's fair to say that maybe the federal government is overstepping their limitations just a little bit in the amount of money they're taking and spending. The entire Constitution was set up to say all the responsibility is set up on the states, and there are a couple things that the federal government can do, and if it's not specifically stated in the Constitution that the federal government can do X, Y, and Z, they can't do it. It has to go to the states. And that's the exact opposite of the way that the federal government operates today. The way they operate today is they say, hey, if the Constitution doesn't prohibit it, the federal government can do it. That's the opposite. The Constitution says if it's not explicitly allowed in the Constitution, the federal government can't do it. It's the opposite. And then that responsibility would land on the states. And so again, I'm not opposing in general just the philosophy or the morality of welfare or taking care of the poor, taking care of the elderly. I think it would be far more effective to be done at the state level and enormously more effective to be done at the city level. And I do think that most effectively it would be done if individuals and families and charities took over and performed that entire task themselves. The more local and the more small scale and the more decentralized you get on these things, the more effective they work. And then, is there any charity which has in its charter the purpose to provide service to all citizens? No, and that's a good thing. You don't want that, because then you have too much waste and too much capital to allocate inefficiently. You want a decentralized system of tiny little nodes in the system that basically are directed at individual tasks and individual needs. You don't want one overseeing, one giant entity that has all of the tasks given to it as part of its responsibility. You want a ton of little focused entities that have one task, and they're much more effective and efficient that way. It says a common good can only be provided by a common organization. That's what a government is. Again, the real common good would be achieved more directly if nobody was tasked with the common good. The common good would be achieved when there's a lot of small individual organizations and entities that are all focused on doing their own thing. And I'm not just making this up here. Again, that's what the Constitution was designed for. It said the federal government can only do A, B, C, and D, and if there's anything that's not specifically explicitly allowed for in the Constitution, the federal government's not allowed to do it. That's allocated to the states to be able to decide and do that. And so it's the original intent of our country was to be a bottom-up structure, not a top-down structure. We're not all in this together if we each must patch together an individual safety net, and the thing we call America becomes unnecessary. Okay, something about safety nets. Imagine you have 10 people standing on the edge of a cliff. I've given this example a lot. 10 people standing on the edge of a cliff. You push one and they fall off the cliff. What does the rest of the group do? Well, they back away from the cliff, right? So when you have individual fragility, that creates systemic anti-fragility. The failure of one becomes the strengthening of the whole. And this is what a true free market system looks like. When there's a bankruptcy or a business failure, the assets are transferred, the ownership of the assets are transferred to the more competent. More and more businesses and people are more conservative. They take less risks. And so that's what you have when you have a free market system where there's individual fragility, where there's the risk or the chance of failure between individuals. Then when those failures happen, it makes the whole system stronger as a whole. Now what happens if you create a safety net where you give everybody a rope and they're all holding onto the rope? Well, you push one person, try and push them off the cliff, they're likely not going to fall because everybody's holding onto the rope, and so the entire system kind of absorbs the shock of that one push, and so you create a safety net where everybody kind of bails out, if you will, the one. But nobody moves away from the cliff then because there's no risk for any individual to fall over. And so if a shock comes along, if a push comes along that's strong enough, instead of just one person falling, it's strong enough to push everybody over. When you have a system without individual risk of failure, it creates systemic fragility. And without that risk of failure for individuals and individual organizations, it makes the entire system more fragile and susceptible to collapse. And so, yes, a bottom-up structure where individual safety nets exist is a far more effective system to create anti-fragility and common good than a system in which everybody has the same safety net, because then you have system overload and the entire system becomes fragile and susceptible to collapse. And then lastly, what about provide for the common defense? Do you think we can pay for that with fees on imports like we did before 1913? Did you know that the Pentagon cannot be audited? It is very common for the Pentagon to not be able, they cannot know whether they've paid a vendor, not paid a vendor, or paid a vendor twice. They are not audited. And this is where the vast majority of our tax dollars go, is into these pockets, these corrupt channels where the money just flows in, and there's no ability to have any sort of accountability on where this money goes. And so bringing the troops home, auditing the Pentagon, creating individual fragility, allowing the risk of failure. Yeah, these are all things that would drastically reduce military spending, and providing for the common defense. If you think that the federal government should be providing for the common defense through a federal military, through a federal standing military, which the founding fathers did not agree with. But even if you believe that, that itself can be done far more efficiently. Like there's most of our tax dollars go to just these black holes of waste because there's no accountability and no way to know where that money is actually going. All right, this next comment. I'm cool with Trump not paying taxes if he doesn't make me pay mine, but I recall he said those who earn less should pay more taxes. Okay, he doesn't make you pay yours. The same credits and deductions that Trump used to pay $750 in taxes are available to everyone. If you don't want to pay taxes, I'll say it again, learn the rules of the game and play to win. Nobody's stopping you from forming a corporation. Nobody's stopping you from becoming a landlord and buying real estate and taking advantage of the real estate deductions. Nobody's forcing you to be an employee and pay the highest amount in taxes of any sort of income or profit or money generator in this country. So if you don't want to pay taxes, you're playing the same game that everybody else is, and the same rules apply to everybody, so take advantage of those rules. This one, I really appreciate this comment, that the merchandise shelf does not show up for anybody with ad blockers. I had no idea that that happened, so I've been talking about my merch, my new shirts that are in the merch shelf below the videos, and apparently they don't show up there if you have ad blockers on your browser. And so going forward, I'm going to have the merchandise link in the description of all of my videos as well. And so whether or not you have an ad blocker on, you'll still be able to find the merch store there, either in the description with the link or in the actual shelf that comes up below the videos. So thank you for this. I didn't know that. Oh, and also you said inflation is also a tax, and that's 100% true. It's a tax that we all have to pay, that we don't get to vote on, and it's a tax that disproportionately hurts the poor over the wealthy because inflation causes asset prices to go up. Only the rich own assets, the poor do not. And so basically it's a tax on the poor to subsidize asset prices, because percentage-wise, the poor are the ones who hold the most amount of cash or fiat compared to assets. All right, and this comment says, does people that don't want to pay taxes are the someones that want a country with the best infrastructure? I don't know what that sentence means there. I assume there's some typos. Basically, it's saying if we want the best infrastructure, good roads, clean streets, good school districts for their kids, very efficient police and firefighters department, no violence on the streets, how do we accomplish that without taxes? None of those are funded by federal tax dollars. Those are all city and state, and as well they should be. And so this video has all been about the federal income tax. State taxes, I never said in the video that state taxes are every state has their own constitution. It's the United States Constitution that says the federal government can't charge an income tax. And so the whole entire video was about federal taxes and what they can charge and how they mismanage it. From a bottom-up structure, though, if a city wants the best schools and they feel that raising taxes for certain school expenditures are the best way to do that, that's fine. Because if somebody doesn't like that the way that that's done in that city and wants to stop paying those taxes, you can just move a half an hour or an hour away to a different city and take part in a different system. And so localized bottom-up systems are far more efficient than a top-down system where nobody has a choice in the matter, basically. And so all the things that are mentioned here in this comment about the streets and the schools and the infrastructure and the police and fire, that's all local. 100%. And so nothing about my video is about local stuff. It was all about federal stuff. Now, there's a very good argument to be made about all those things being accomplished much better if they're privatized. That's a completely different subject and topic for a completely different video another time. All right, this next comment. I think in your argument, you assume that the tax code is inherently perfect in reflecting its original intentions. Absolutely not. It's precisely because I think that the tax system is broken and ineffective and inefficient that I urge people to pay as little as possible in taxes. It could be that the tax as itself is an imperfect tool. 100%. It is not perfect. It is far from perfect. It is horrible. Would like to hear more of your views on the taxation system as a whole, on its effectiveness. Yeah, it's horribly ineffective, but that doesn't change the fact that the same deductions and credits and rules are available to everybody. And so if you want to be able to put your dollars to the best use from a moral perspective, from a patriotic perspective, from a wealth generation perspective, from taking care of people perspective, whatever it is your goal is, you're going to be able to make that decision better yourself yourself than handing your money over to the government and letting Uncle Sam take his cut and decide how to allocate your capital. So yeah, the tax system's garbage, 100%. And it tries to incentivize and disincentivize behaviors that the government believes are beneficial or not beneficial to our society. I don't think it does a good job of that. I don't think that the government is correct. And again, that's precisely why I'm urging people, don't give them your money. They're not doing a good job with it. Keep it yourself and do a better job with it yourself. It's not even a selfish thing, because if you want to be selfless and you want to take care of people, like for healthcare or the elderly or the sick or the children or the hungry, that's fine. You're going to be better at doing that by allocating those dollars yourself. Your few hundred or few $1,000s that are going to the government are not making a difference on that front anyway, and they could make a real difference if you deployed those dollars instead, locally directed, as a laser focus, instead of just having them allocated from the top down. All right, this comment. I think this is being kind to Trump. I'm going to pause right there because, almost every video that I do, either the, right-wingers call me a libtard or the left-wingers call me a racist Trump supporter or something like that. Neither. I don't like what Trump has done economically. It's the same thing that Obama and Bush and Clinton did. He just doubled down on everything that his predecessors had doubled down on already before. Now, that doesn't mean that that he was a failure as a businessman. Do you know what the stats are on inheriting money? Most inherited money is gone within 3 generations when you consider large inherited wealth, like, I think it's $10 million or more. When you consider large inherited wealth, it's almost all of it is gone after 3 generations. That's why you don't have dynasties still existing today from, old money like the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilts or the Carnegies. Largely inherited wealth disappears. Number 1. Number 2, in wealth that comes through things like lotteries, that's gone within 3 to 5 years. Most lottery winners are bankrupt within 3 to 5 years. Same thing with professional athletes who get these massive amounts of money. Most professional athletes are bankrupt within 3 to 5 years of their careers ending. So it's not about the amount of money that you receive at the beginning. For the vast majority of Americans, if they would have been handed $1 million or $5 million or $10 million or even $100 million from Daddy Trump, the vast majority of Americans would have lost it within 3 to 5 years. The statistics prove that overwhelmingly. And so yes, he got a head start, but most people who get a head start, it doesn't help. From an outside view, it looks like he inherited wealth, invested poorly, mismanaged businesses, and borrowed heavily. It wasn't about some elaborate scheme to reduce taxation rather than the position a failed businessman has found himself in. This is false. Actually, Bloomberg, who regularly reports stories that are kind of anti-Trump, Bloomberg just released an article, and I'll link that in the description below. They just released an article about how just because he paid $750 in taxes and has debt and losses, that means nothing about his overall wealth. You don't get to this level of wealth without taking advantage of those tax advantageous, the credits and the deductions, and the aligning your business with the way that the government says align this way, and we'll give you your money back. Essentially, a tax return just shows income and expenses, losses, debt that you're using to offset. It has nothing to do with overall net worth. And so this is from a business perspective, it would show his business failings if he had paid a lot in taxes. You would 100% expect anybody who has any large amount of wealth to be paying little or zero in taxes. Exactly how do all politicians make basically 100% of their money? You give them a third of your money each week. The IRS is nothing more than an extortion racket that was legalized by the politicians that voted it into office. 100%. Absolutely nailed it right there. That and the fact that Congress, they're the only ones who are legally allowed to trade on insider information. They regularly front-run major economic and legislative events. They know the laws that are coming in, whether they're going to be approved or disapproved, especially in like healthcare, whether something is going to be legalized, through the FDA. And they regularly front run and trade on that inside information. And almost all of Congress members' stock portfolios, investment portfolios, regularly outperform professional money managers. And so, yes, the fact that the money that they're actually earning in their paychecks doesn't come from any value they're producing. They're actually just taking it from your pockets. And then number 2, the fact that when they use that money, they can use it to do things that are illegal for you to do. And they have access to insider information before you do. And they use that to make investment decisions that nobody else has the legal ability or the information ability to do. That's how they get so rich. Why is there one thumbs down? Who the hell wants to pay taxes? 100%. And again, again, this is what I was saying at the beginning of the video. Sometimes the negative response that I get to videos just kind of boggles my mind. I don't understand where some of the feedback comes from, but some of these questions or critiques were deserving of a response, and so that's why I thought I'd make a video about responding to all of the critiques and questions there. So hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments section below if you do had any further questions or want any further follow-up on anything that I said here. As always, really appreciate you guys. Have a great day.